please just let me know and I can send those to you. I also have an update that the amendment comments are still under review, Kendall. I should have an update later on this week for you once it moves further along in the process. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee for Anita? Hearing none. Anita, thank you so much for that update. I believe we may have some questions for you later on in the meeting as we approve our technical memo. So if you could hold on, because we may have some questions. Moving on to item number 5, just quickly a chair report. I know we did this last meeting and I shared with you some information, but once again, I wanted to, with the presence of Suzanne Scott as well as Steve Gonzalez and Debbie Reed, who I believe is on the call, I wanted to once again thank you three and everybody else involved with the City of San Antonio's bond committees that we just had. Suzanne did an amazing job as co-chair for the drainage portion of it. Gave me a hard time every now and then, which is okay. Stephen participated in the streets committee, and he asked so many questions, but which is good. And Debbie Reed also represented one of the council districts. She was amazing in her questioning and challenging us all the time. Debbie, thank you. But all in all, I just wanted to say thank you. One of the things that came out of that, and I wanted to share this with this group, and maybe let Suzanne kind of talk a little bit about it, but one of the things that came out of that was a desire within our community to create a committee that could help lead and direct some of the City of San Antonio's drainage work moving forward. I thought that, which really resembled or really gave hints to what our previous Watershed Improvement Advisory Committee, when the BRWM was created. Suzanne, could you take a moment to talk a little bit about how that got developed and what your thoughts were on that?
Yes, thank you, Neffy. Actually, in talking with all the members of the committee, they came to the realization, as we have going through this process and even in our daily jobs when we deal with flood control, is that it's very complicated, and that it takes a lot of time to really understand the dynamics of a watershed. How do these projects work? What's the source of the flooding? How the city is looked historically at flooding, how to take a more holistic view, and really trying to understand not only what's happening today, but also what's going to be happening in the future as it relates to flooding. So all the committee members, regardless of where they were within the city, even realized that to be a productive member of that bond committee, they needed to have a lot more time and a lot more understanding of how flooding works, and some of the challenges that the city has to look at on an ongoing basis. So the idea behind putting the committee together is really to have a group of consistent representatives throughout the city, citizen representatives from throughout the city, to really try to advise the city on an overall master plan for flood control projects, trying to look more holistically at the prioritization of what projects need to be done. Neffy made a compelling presentation to the committee about the fact that you could do something upstream in a district upstream that may have very good benefits downstream, but because everything has become so parochial, everyone sort of looks district by district, they don't really think about the holistic views of how things can get done. So I think this will be a great opportunity to educate and inform, as well as try to prioritize projects in a holistic way. And I think given this process that's going on with the state, it will get the city more prepared to take advantage of future flooding funding opportunities that come forward through this process. Another aspect of an action that was taken by the committee that will go to City Council next week is that they all, again, unanimous, to have the city look at incorporating green infrastructure, nature-based analysis, nature-based solutions analysis to all projects, all infrastructure projects, not only flood control, but streets or parks, others, to see how these techniques can be used throughout all the city's infrastructure to address flood control, stormwater, water quality, provide recreational opportunities, just really the multi-benefit aspects of that come with green infrastructure. So that again was another unanimous action that the bond committee took, again showing that the committee, no matter where they are in the city, understands the importance of trying to keep as much open space and green space and make that as functional as possible.
Thank you, Suzanne. Debbie, do you have anything you'd like to add? I know you were a real important component to our committee representing District 2. Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, thank you for the opportunity, but I spoke the last time and Suzanne did a great job of summarizing and really incorporating the concept of a watershed approach. Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez, anything you'd like to add from the streets side of things? I know that was a different committee, but
you know, we didn't talk about drainage too much during the streets. I mean, everything was pretty tied in with that. So no, not related to drainage.
thank you, sir. One of the final points that I wanted to make with that is that one of the results, while certainly the committee focused on those projects to be funded by the city, there was significant time and dedication talked about those projects, as we refer to it, as below the line, meaning those projects that weren't necessarily going to be funded at this time, but that had an opportunity that made it a priority to that. And those projects are significant in scope and magnitude. And those are going to be some of the projects the city will be putting forward for consideration during this process. So hopefully we can incorporate some of those projects into some of the things that we'll see that, and it will be projects that are pretty good, well vetted by the community with some thoughts. And so that's what I have to report as far as the chair's report is concerned. We can move on to agenda item number 6, which is an update from the Region 12 subcommittees. I don't believe we actually had any meetings since then, so we'll move on to the following item because we didn't have any meetings over the holidays. This is the bulk of the meeting today, which is going to be the discussion and appropriate action regarding the consultant's work and schedule, specifically with regard to the technical memo, I believe, or the technical memo was emailed to everyone here. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review it. Kendall, was the technical memo online also? And was available online. So I'm going to turn the time over now to our consultant to go over that. I believe you've received some comments. If not, here's an opportunity to do so. So Ron, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm gonna stay seated up here instead of being up there, so I can sit in front of all these documents in case y'all have questions. Just a little background on the technical memo. The technical memo, we sent it out in December, mid-December, got comments back, and emailed that back out to the group. And we addressed the comments. We also included the comment log, and I will go through some of those here in a second. A little bit on the technical memo is, note this is a draft technical memo, so anything in here can and will change as we go along through the process. Data is being added. Data will continue to be added as we get toward the report, the final report, the draft report this summer, then the final report in the fall. None of this, nothing that we're turning in is final. It's a snapshot in time of where we're at and where we're going with that. So I will, this has been available. Y'all have seen it, put it out. In the draft comments, we did receive comments from Suzanne. Aaron provided comments, Derek provided comments, and those are summarized here on this comment log. And I guess I'll open up first. Suzanne or Aaron, I know Derek's not online, but Suzanne or Aaron, did you want me to go over any of your comments in particular, or address those? For the most part, most of it was incorporated. If it was not incorporated, some of it, an example, Suzanne, you made a comment about the halt and safe system being incorporated as a study. We didn't incorporate it as a study, but we did talk about it and include links in the low water crossing section. So that's in there. People can access that. We added, there was some, Derek had made some comments on the historical flooding. We made some updates there. Aaron provided several comments on some of the reports that the River Authority had done or is doing, provided, especially all the risk map studies and what entities those cover. So that was added.
Question though about entities with the higher standards. So you added San Antonio, which is good, right? But so at Bear County doesn't have.
We went through off the checklist, Suzanne, that was received by that was given out by the Water Development Board, provided by FEMA, and talked about all the higher standards. We went through and we had a checklist that came off of that. And to get to the higher standards, we were going to sit with, an example was sitting with Neffy and talking with him, and he talked to his staff, and due to enforcement, they're actually going to go to a high level of enforcement or standard. It'll be sitting down with Dave and his team, and going through and seeing how we meet on the checklist. Do we have higher standards, CRS rating, different things, not that the county's in that, but those are some of the things that we look at, or that's how it's rated on that.
Well, I just, obviously it's a big hole in the donut, so to speak, and everyone around. So I just wanted to make sure that we looked at that. I think that I would want to make sure that Dave concurs with that Bear County would not be orange in this map as we move forward.
Suzanne here, Troy Dorman on the consultant team. Wanted to just mention that TFMA does do a higher standard survey. So that was part of the information that we were using as guidance from Texas Water Development Board. And then there was also some specific standards. So that's what Ron was talking about. We use that as guidance. But there was, in the table, there is some, I guess, qualitative assessment of your standards. And so we can use that, whether it's considered a strong standard or a medium standard, we can use that to select whether that is a higher standard or not. So we need to go, that's what Ron's talking about. We kind of need to go through that process as we get towards finalizing this technical memo and finalizing the regional flood plan, if there's any concern about any particular jurisdiction.
When I looked at this, Suzanne, a lot of the information, I'll give you an example. One of the areas of concern was when I saw the number of fatalities within a region, and I happen to know because I work with this the San Antonio Bear County Office of Emergency Management, and I know that count is higher than, I believe it was stated like 29 or something. The last report that I saw for San Antonio, including city and county, I think we were at 34. I'm confirming that number with the EOC, but for this was concerned, I was looking for the form. I was looking for the structure of the document, because I know some of the data is still draft and we'll still have time to update it. So I'm going to provide the consultant team the backup information that I have for San Antonio and Bear County for that time period, because the time period, Bear County and San Antonio has a much longer time period, but the time period that you're reporting on, I had a count of 34. that I've confirmed with the EOC. I just need to get that database to you to update that. So when I was reviewing this, I kind of took it with a little grain of salt, realizing that we would have an opportunity to update the actual data. Is that correct?
Yes, Neffy, that is totally correct. Right now, what you're looking at is data that either came from the National Weather Service or FEMA. That isn't any data that came from any EOC or community. This was data that was readily available that we could get and manipulate. And that's where a lot of the damages and dollar amounts that you see on there, those are FEMA numbers that came from their database.
I did have a request in the low water in section 4. Is it 4.2 or 4.3? The section with the low water crossings. You do make reference to the halt system as well as the safe route system. My request was to add the website that the River Authority manages for the region called Bear Flood, the Bear Flood site. And the reason why I wanted to request the addition of that website is because that is a publicly facing site that allows the public to access the data that both the county and the city collect. And there's a publicly facing site there that the River Authority does a pretty good job. So I'd ask if you could please incorporate that into it.
And one of the comments, and you can kind of see better on what we have referenced on the back page of the memo, Appendix A7. It's the full reference list. That way, we have links hyperlinks throughout the document. But in case that doesn't work for people, we put the full reference. So you can see we have the master plan viewer, FEMA's Map Service Center, risk map viewer, the USGS mapping website, different things, the halt system, all of that. Those are the ones that we have now, and we will add the Bear Flood for you, Neffy. That's the.
Is this a time to ask another question or make a comment?
Certainly, yes.
Ron, I wanted to just kind of look at Exhibit C, Table 13, and I apologize, some of my comments were discombobulated. I just ran out of time, but I think I'm more understanding and looking at Table 13 for the potentially feasible flood mitigation projects. I wanted to know if there'll be clarification on those headings and what can be included so that the person filling out the chart will have a better understanding of what the meaning is behind the heading. And one of the ones that I looked at was the potential to recharge or for water quantity. Can this be expanded and include the potential of a project to recharge groundwater and aquifers as a water supply benefit?
The headings there, if you're asking about the headings, Debbie,
Yes.
headings are required by the Water Development Board. Those are a standard that go into a geodatabase, so we cannot change the headings. What we include there can be, that's up to the planning group's discretion, but we couldn't change the heading.
Right, so the heading would stay water supply benefit, but in the explanation of what does that mean, adding the ability to recharge groundwater and aquifers.
Yes, I think
Exactly.
that there's no reason why we couldn't include those.
Okay, and when I talked to Reem, she made it sound like we did have more flexibility. Maybe Anita can clarify, but I know that the group had talked about adding some kind of a component for resiliency, and I don't know if that'll be pulled under environmental and explained further, but anyway, I was wondering if you could address that. something that we spent quite a bit of time discussing in one of our meetings.
Maybe, I don't know if you know this offhand, Anita. I guess the question is could we add a heading or a column or a data entry for resiliency?
I will check in with the data team about that and get back to you. I don't want to give a definite answer.
Thank you. Appreciate
No
that.
worries.
And Debbie, I think we can find a way somewhere. There's the regional flood planning group, the reason for recommendation, or there's other places where I think we can add some text or information, and we could add that in there as part of that. We'll find a way to add the resiliency piece in there if we can't add the heading.
Okay.
Yeah, Debbie, and
Thanks. I
I'm
appreciate
also curious to see when we talk about resilience. I'd like for us to be a little bit more specific, if you will, with that, because in looking at the databases and looking at all these fields, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can incorporate that. I think we have to make a concerted effort to define what we mean by resilient. And I think I know what Debbie's referring to, but I think that if we as a group are more specific, I think there's going to be ways for us to accomplish that. I think we need to, maybe that might be something the technical committee may help us better define when they refer to resilience.
Yeah, and as we go through that, we can define these things in a lot more detail in the final report or in the draft report as we go forward.
Great. I'll be glad to assist Ron on that if you need any assistance.
Thanks, Debbie.
Neffy,
Thank you.
question. So the response on the non-structural flood mitigation projects on page 33.
Mhm.
And I had asked the question, why can't you incorporate development policies or incentives, things like that are non-structural flood mitigation projects. And your answer here is that the Water Development Board says that they are with non-zero capital cost and other non-recurring cost, so that these other things would not be considered under this criteria. But an easement has reoccurring cost because you have to go and monitor the easement to make sure that it's being managed in the way you had to first acquire it. Now you could debate whether or not that was a capital cost, but then you also have reoccurring cost on an easement. So, but yet it is included. So I'm just curious, because, early warning systems have to be maintained. That's a capital cost that goes in. Plus there are, there's a cost to putting those systems together, whatever they are, even if it's a system that's fed by monitors that are out in the watershed that feed back into a system. There's cost, plus there's upkeep. So I guess I'm just curious why, because usually non-structural does include opportunities for development standards, incentives, education, that sort of thing. So I guess, could you further explain why those things?
Sure,
aren't
Suzanne. And I was reading that as development codes, policies, incentives. I was reading those. When you start talking flood warning systems or getting easements or land set aside, things that are going to have a cost, I can see those being a project. As far as the codes, policies, and if those things, I can see those being a strategy. Just not sure how we're gonna put a cost to policy.
Yeah. I guess the only
Ron,
thing
a comment. a quick comment on that?
Okay, hold
Because
on
one
just
of
one
the
second,
things,
Debbie, just a second.
okay, okay.
Just, I mean, because we talked, an example about what, what Bernie's doing and how they've made some changes to their development codes that are responding to development. And I mean, you're saying that those kinds of things that are actions, CRS programs, other things that are policy opportunities for people to do things, communities and others, those would not fall into any of these defined elements that we're supposed to come up with in the next phase of this that fall in these, this alphabet soup of FMSs and all these other things. They're not considered those?
No, I wouldn't call them a project, an
them-
FMP. We could get those as an FME, could be an evaluation,
Okay.
right? We could do a study to look similar to what Bernie did, an evaluation on their criteria, similar to what the city of San Antonio did. They've done studies to look at downstream impacts and different things. So those studies could be in FMEs.
So could under the FMEs then, could we add ordinances, codes, incentives, things like that? Another category here of actions that governmental actions that could be taken that are also things that can have impact in a positive way, looking at the future under your FM. If it doesn't fall under the FMPs, then could we add it to the list of FMEs in this page 32, where you put watershed planning, engineering, project planning? Could we have another category of these other types of, governmental?
To me, I think that those things fall under the strategy category, which basically at this point is open to any and everything that isn't a defined project or evaluation, and it leaves it open for whatever under strategies. Right now we can't say, we're not ready to say we want to do X on development and let's evaluate the cost in this area. We may not even, we're not even ready to say what those strategies would be at all. In my mind, it has to go through a strategy first, then it goes to evaluation, then it goes to a project, from the level of definition and the level of cost and detail analysis. So those things in my mind still reside in the strategy category. And we haven't done anything here to preclude any of that, because strategies is still open to whatever at this point. I don't know that I'm not even, evaluation it may be, but evaluation, I don't know that we need to get into that level of detail right now. Strategy is going to funnel anything else out to those other categories eventually.
Debbie, did you have a comment?
Yes, we have been discussed about looking at creating a template, maybe based on the Bernie requirements, but creating a template that could be utilized for any community, that they can start with that, and as they deem appropriate, be able to modify it, but to give that as a tool to other communities. Would that, to me, it seems that would be more of a project, but it could still be an evaluation.
But I think you guys are already jumping to the outcome. This memo is trying to lay out a process we're going to go through to identify those things. And those comments, we're jumping to saying, let's use this and create an evaluation and a project. And right now in the memo, we're just outlining a flow and process and things that we're either definitely saying are in or definitely saying out. Strategies for me is open to any and everything at this point.
Right, and Debbie, I think your point is a really interesting point. I'm really interested in that, in having that discussion and creating some kind of template. But let me remind you that any community already has a template for, say, which is the basic FEMA guidelines. Now, if the committee agrees that we need to have, whether it's higher standards or improve upon those, basic FEMA guidelines, which I think is what you're kind of referring to. I agree with
Yes.
Kara in that it starts off as a strategy. So let me give you an example. Let's say we have the normal FEMA standard of allowing people to fill in the floodways or the flood fringes. It's basic FEMA. If our committee feels, and this is just hypothetical, if we feel that our river basin should not be using or should fill in less in the fringes, then that begins as a strategy. We're going to identify, and that's what I think Kara is referring to. That begins as a strategy first, and then as we start evaluating and start looking at it, then it becomes maybe then at that point becomes kind of an evaluation, and then eventually becomes a project in that we talk to City of Runge. I like picking on City of Runge. I'm sorry, I just like the way it sounds. And then we talk to them about doing that, and maybe that becomes still an evaluation or a project. But whatever the case is, I agree with Kara that it needs to begin as a strategy if we're going to look at policy type of improvements and changes.
Okay, Neffy, this is Suzanne. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to that idea. It's just that's not what it says in this document. It says here, this is a list of feasible things that we've identified so far, and it's not suggesting that we feel that this is the building blocks. There are strategies that could be ordinances, et cetera, whatever. Then it goes, those need to be evaluated, and then it goes down. The way this is listed here is it says this is a list of potential things that we've already looked at. And it doesn't suggest to me in the way this is formulated that the strategy is sort of first in the, some things may drop into a strategy that we have not yet thought about more detailed to either move into an evaluation or a project, as you suggested, Kara. So I'm just, if this is supposed to be the first thing out of the chute that we're saying is, quote, the list of things that we've thought about, I don't want to suggest, and I don't think Kara is saying this either, that we haven't thought about whether or not ordinances or things. I mean, we already have some ordinances. I know the threat here is that people may think that we're already thinking of more stringent development standards. I'm not putting any kind of boundaries on what that is, what are we doing? But we know that that's a tool in our toolbox, right? I mean, y'all have already done some of that already, as has other cities. And that has to go through a process, obviously. It's not just going to be something that we say here. So anyway, the way this is listed is it makes it sound like this is what we've thought of so far. And I mean, so I don't know if maybe it's just in the way that this is presented that gives me a little pause to make it sound like we've not really thought about other things that are more actions that particular governments could have in their toolbox. Whether San Antonio decides to do it or not, I mean, we're really thinking about this as a region. San Antonio has their own process, but so does Bernie or Runge or Carn City. They all can make their own decisions and as it relates to ordinances or things.
For me, one of my comments to them, and I'm just going to give Ron and Troy my comments, is this section isn't clear on, some things we go E's and P's and S's, other places we go P's and E's, the order of the appendix. And so to Suzanne's point, this isn't overly clear that you flow through a path. And some may skip strategies and evaluations because the projects are already there and they meet the criteria. But this is kind of jumbled of what goes where. But the one thing that I was comfortable with is the strategies portion at the end on page 33. It's the catch-all. It's anything else that isn't already an ERP. And so I felt like it didn't preclude, and for me, I didn't want to add stuff here because then it almost implies that's all we're adding, and we haven't even gotten far enough in the process yet to really vet the what do we want to add. So I liked that that part was very open-ended. If it isn't an E or a P, we're open to adding anything on strategies. Nothing's ruled out yet. But this section for me is, guys, a little not, is there a process it flows through for certainly, and maybe for policy related issues it flows through, but it's mix and mash here.
There is a process, and yes, because a strategy, what we're saying here is a strategy could ultimately become a project. And I don't know, that wasn't clear to me when I looked at this. I know y'all talked about this at your technical committee more so than we, and so anyway, I'm just thinking maybe a little bit more time explaining that process would give me a little bit more comfort to say if that it is the catch-all, that we could still bring some things forward that may not be identified here yet, but that it's something that we could vet over time.
Hey, Chair Garza, I wanted to know if I could just jump in really quick. We did
Sure, that's
have
fine.
the technical consultant webinar where we did provide our own flow chart of how an idea of a flood-prone area could become an FMP, an FME, or an FMS. We posted the video and the slides on our website. Like I said, I could email that to you guys if it'd be helpful, because it does give a more thorough and clear information of how we see things fall into whether it's an FME, an FMP, or FMS. I can say during that webinar, when we talked about FMSs, and like I think Suzanne mentioned earlier, how it doesn't have non-reoccurring or non-capital costs, when we talked about FMSs in that webinar, we were thinking of things like education campaigns, program development, or other non-engineering studies like floodplain regulation development, or flood authority or revenue raising studies, public awareness programs. Those were the kind of examples we gave for FMSs. I could see if you all feel it might be helpful if I could give that presentation maybe in February when we have that meeting before the data deliverables are submitted in March. Just let me
Anita,
know.
that's exactly what I was going to ask, if you could do that prior to the final submittal of this tech memo. Now, keep in mind, this is a draft version of the tech memo, so we still have time to do those needed changes and updates to the actual data within it. So if we need to add flow charts and things like that, we will certainly have that opportunity. But yeah, if Anita can provide that presentation to us for us to get a better sense of that flow path. And I've seen it. I've seen that flow path.
Right. Yes. If any, like I said, we have the recording of that webinar up on the website if anyone wants to see it before February, and then I will check in and see if I can get permission to present it in the February meeting. But we do provide a little bit more explanation on how we see things flow into whether it's the FMP, FME, or FMS.
Thank you, Anita. Ron, did you have additional comments?
FME and an FMS that talked about the process, and then in the section 9, it starts talking about us identifying potential FMEs, FMPs, and FMSs, and these categories were not chosen by.
Did we lose audio?
No.
His light is on.
His light is on. Anita, I'm sorry, we had a faulty mic here.
No worries.
I think we didn't put batteries in it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Ron, maybe if for one thing you did right now in this section, y'all added a includes but not limited to. Right.
That's a great idea. I
Yeah,
like
Mike.
having examples.
My goodness, you guys didn't give Dave Wegman a mic. No wonder he was quiet today.
I think just adding a but not limited to gives us enough coverage that we've got it open-ended and some clarity there. You know, because I'm going to take the jab here. One of my things is there's a lot of guidance coming from Water Development Board, but it's basically dictating so much that we're not being left with our own discussion. And I'm going to caution that we need to, you know, leave ourselves that room for our discussion for our region.
Certainly. Any additional comments? Prior to the meeting, Ron and I were talking a little bit about the tech memo itself and what it is that we need to approve today. So let me review what it is that we need to approve today for today's actions, because it is due Thursday, the 7th. We have to approve the technical memo as well as the supporting data or the form and structure of that data. Because here recently we did receive from the Texas Water Development Board, we actually received a checklist of items. Can we bring that up? Okay. Ron, can you talk a little bit about?
Sure. Thanks, Neffy. So about the time that I gave you all this for review, or right after we gave you all this document for review, the Water Development Board produced this checklist. This was the first time we saw this checklist. It was a little different than the ones we saw previously, or what was included in the guidance. And it added some things. The main things that it added was, so as you all know, originally in this process, we moved the geodatabase from a January 7th deliverable to a March 7th deliverable. So that got pushed. Well, they are asking for some of the data for the geodatabase to be included in the submittal. We have the information. We just need to go over it today. We have a way to go over it. We're going to go through it today. I wanted y'all to be able to see it. We are, again, all of the data is draft. Data can be added, deleted, removed, all of that. And we'll go through some of the up here, and you see in the checklist, like 1.1 is a list of political subdivisions or entities. That's in the memo. Number 2 is a polygon feature class with the entities. We have that, the information. So all of the information we have, we just this checklist is part of what we're going to be turning into the Water Development Board on the 7th. So you all need to approve it. And so I wanted y'all to be able to see some of that today. So we'll go through it. But we, as a group, we kind of did luck out in our, some of the other regions have already approved their plans. And so they're having to go back in special sessions and catch this to approve this data. So they're scrambling a little bit, but so we have this data, and I thought it would be easier to go through it. Ludovine Varga with HDR, she's actually in the office, so we have good internet connection, and she's going to share her screen for everyone to see. So as she pulls that up, her and Kendall will work on pulling that up. One of the things I do want to note, all of this information is what we're going to have. It is due final to the board on March the 7th. So as part of that, we're developing a storyboard, and we've talked about that storyboard with the outreach committee and maybe even in the technical committee, and that should be live for this group next week. We have all the information. We're cleaning it up. It's getting posted, so you'll be able to go through all of the data. And I know some of this is going to be hard to see, so if you need to navigate to a screen closer to a screen, please do. I'm not asking for, I will provide the geodatabase to anybody who wants it to look at it. And I'm not asking that you make sure that each one of the dams and low water crossings is in the right location. I just want to give you an opportunity to look at the information, see what we will be providing. That way, when you are making the recommendation to approve this list, that you can do that.
Ron, just kind of in this, maybe even for Nita too, really the purpose of this submittal Friday that's due is teacher checking that all the consultants and planning groups are doing their work, who's way off schedule, who's keeping on schedule. This is basically just checking that you're doing your work. Nothing happens with this. This is 100% draft. It's just there. Oh yeah, are you working or are you sitting on your laurels, right?
That's how we have interpreted that.
So if anything's wrong, oops, it gets fixed between now and March.
Absolutely.
If we disagree with anything, oops, it gets fixed between now and March. And this is Water Development Board's going to go through it and make sure everybody is actively, aggressively working towards a deadline.
And this gives the Water Development Board a snapshot to see our different processes, to make sure that we're not off base in our goals, in our 4B process, in the things that we've identified, how we're collecting our data, how we're presenting our data. This gives them a snapshot to say, okay, they are doing things right. They're following what we've provided. And this will be, any comments that'll come back from this is probably going to be more not geared toward regional flood planning group. You got this wrong. It's going to be, hey, HDR half, we need to see it this way.
Well, and since there's only about 4 consultants working across the state of Texas in any combination, okay, fine. I mean, what? I mean, am I off by 1 or 2? I mean, it's the same 4 groups or maybe 5. I mean, that's I started with 4 or 5, right? I mean, that's about it. So, okay, sorry.
Kara, the other thing that I think is important, and as I'm reviewing this information, I think it's been beneficial to me, not only reviewing the format of this memo, and certainly some examples of things, and I'll certainly, as I mentioned before, there's some information that still needs to get updated and things like that, and some flow charts that we need to add and so forth. But what it does for me is that it starts better focusing on what kind of projects and strategies I feel need to be in there, and it starts putting it in the correct buckets in the kind of form, and it helps me be able to identify, okay, these are the things that are important to me that I'm going to make sure that advocate. So it also helps discipline my thought process in what it is that we're going to be pushing forward, moving forward. So not only is it beneficial for the Texas Water Development Board, but in a certain way, it also helps us to get a better understanding of exactly what kind of things we're going to be focusing on. So the other comment I had is that this is GIS online, so I'm assuming anybody from the committee that wants to review this data can and without a problem.
It'll be by the time you get it, it'll be fully online. It'll be fully published.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's go through it.
We're working on ArcGIS Online. They're going to be looking at it today on ArcGIS Online. When we provide it to the committee, they won't need an ArcGIS Online account. You will be web ready.
And I wanted to mention that because I know some committee members that may not be here, or those that may be here, you'll be able to, if you want to review this and look into this, you can access this map. You will eventually be able to access this map and look over the data as needed. So
that's correct. It's really going to be the way that it was our idea way that we came up with for y'all to be able to review the data that we're going to be submitting on the set March, right? Because how are you going to, if I just handed you a geodatabase, most of you are going to throw it back at me in whatever form I give it to you. But so if we put it online, let you look through the data, comment, that'll be the way. And one thing I want to piggyback, Neffy, you're sitting here saying, oh, I'm thinking about my projects. We're collecting a lot of this data, and a lot of the data we're going to show is for those areas in all of the regions that don't have very much data, so we can start identifying, ooh, look, here's some areas where, here's some things, they may not have projects identified. They may not have the Bernies and the Bexar counties and the San Antonios that have projects, that have capital programs. And so a lot of this data will go in and we can use it in the lower counties to say, it'll help us develop FMEs, FMPs, FMSs. So
I need to make a comment on this because I think this is an important component. I'm assuming the communications group has really gravitated towards this. There are going to be situations where communities may not have a project ready to go in this go round, but they do. That doesn't mean they don't have flooding issues. This is an opportunity where we identify a flood issue and then it comes in as an evaluation first. So maybe what we go after is, as an evaluation, is to perform the study that happens. And then the result of that study becomes a project. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're dealing with the city of Runge that has some flooding issues in that community, but they don't necessarily have a project right now. Well, we can submit that as a FME so that it could be funded to perform the study that will eventually develop into that project. So I don't want us to just feel like, oh man, I don't have a project, I can't submit on this. That's the beauty of this, is that it's not that. It's if there's a need there, we need to identify it. We need to go on that website and put a star on it and say there's a need there. And then it's going to be our job or the consultant's job to figure out, okay, is it going to fall in that FME or is it an FMP, a project or an evaluation? And I think that's important. And hopefully the message gets out to the communities that it's okay not to have a project, just to identify where the problem is, and then we can get there.
yeah, and I think to piggyback on what Neffy was saying, if we have a certain area where we have some very critical low water crossings, we could roll that into a project to do a halt system or a safe system, incorporate, develop a project around that. So there are ways, to think outside the box and develop, flood warning systems and other things that we can, just because hasn't been a project identified or one on a piece of paper or study's been done, there's ways we're going to be able to get that into an FME or an FMP.
Bron, do we want to go over this database or?
Sure. Yes, I want to run through a little bit. That way when you're approving this, you can at least you've seen it. So again, a lot of this information is the information that you're seeing is what we're going to have to submit on Thursday, and how we're going to do it. I'm having trouble seeing it, but so I know you are too.
Yeah, you've got to zoom in, and then it'll become available as you zoom in. I don't know if you wanted to run through the checklist, and we can show the different feature classes that we need.
Yeah. So the right now, what you're looking at, what you're seeing there, that you're seeing the dots are the low water crossings. And just so you know, that was the low water crossings that we got as part of the Water Development Board, as part of their database. I think TxDOT has part of that. We've looked. I think I'm pretty sure, Dave, all of your halt systems are on there. Neffy, I think most of the safe systems, but we're in the process of checking that. But I think all of those are captured. The streams, so as part of there's flood infrastructure that's part of the checklist, existing flood infrastructure, and that's your streams, that's your storm sewer, and so those are a couple of things you're seeing. There's also the
Ron, those gray lines, that's my City of San Antonio's underground storm drain network, right?
That is correct. We've used your latest storm drain file for that. We I think there was one provided by the Water Development Board, but we grabbed the latest from the city's GIS site. The existing flood hazard layer is the data that we discussed as part of our 2A, where we had the hierarchy, where we used the SARA preliminary studies, we used the what's the NFIP, what's being done with BLE risk map. And then last but not least, the Fathom data. So we have complete coverage throughout the watershed on all of the existing flood conditions. I'm just trying to think what all of the dams, TCEQ dams was on there. We supplemented that. We looked, that does include the Sarah dams. I think they're just different names, Aaron, between what was in the database.
Can we pan to an area that's a little bit more rural in setting, maybe just
sure.
to see what?
Can you go to one of the lower counties, Ludovine?
I'm just on the low water crossings. I mean, obviously there's the website that is a data layer that you're going to look at. Because I know just based on where your dots are, it doesn't look like you have the Bear flood.
Yeah, those are all of those should be included in there.
They look like they were all in the southern part of Bear County. Maybe I just didn't get to see.
Yeah, maybe it didn't resolve at that elevation, but like just on the halt sites, we've got about 160 of those. And then Ron, if you get with me also, we can get you our GIS database file on all the county's low water crossings, regardless of whether they've been protected or not.
Okay. I want to say there's like 1,000 low water crossings throughout the region. And yes, it probably doesn't have, I'm willing to bet in the lower counties, it doesn't have every single low water crossing on there. These are just the ones that have been identified.
You know, in my mind, it's okay. I've looked through here. Here's the list of all the sources you've compiled. I think over the next 2 months, it'd be prudent for each of the entities that's providing those data, or, you know, Bear County looking, or those with, you know, knowledge in those database, going in and double checking that they feel like it's a complete data set. But for our purposes today, you've given us the list of what you've included, and we're going to assume that we should assume, in my mind, that the data you were given was complete as of now, and we've got between now and March to update or verify if there's data gaps. And so the real question is, hey, do we think there's any source of data missing that should be added, or are we comfortable with what the data sources that's there? And to me, it seemed appropriate for this level at this point.
And one of the things too that I know we'll need to probably some input, Suzanne, you can probably help us on, Debbie. One of the things is natural flood features or natural features that we have. We have several wetlands identified. I think we have some sinkholes, and I know that there's a lot of other areas that y'all might have identified or have access to in a database. And so and you can see those are more prevalent as we get lower downstream in the wetlands.
What's the wetland source there?
I believe that's part of the floodplain quilt that was developed by the Water Development Board. That's a part of what as part of existing flood infrastructure, sinkholes, wetlands, all of that is that's how the Water Development Board is breaking it out under there.
Do you have the dams in Karnes County also on there?
Yes. I think can you zoom into Karnes County, Ludovine? I know there are some dams. I think we.
There's some dams. Let's DeWitt, this is a Carnes.
Yeah, they're hard to see on that one. We need to change
Yeah.
that. They're blue right now, Melissa. So it's really hard to see. Whether or not we're catching all of them, you know, this is the database we got. This was from the Corps Water Development Board, and we've looked at the data off the website, and I think we've caught all of those, Melissa. It's just hard to see. We need to update the symbology on that one for that one. Sorry.
Yeah.
This was a last minute effort to try to be able to show you some data today. So we had a short amount of time to get this prepared. So
And that was because of the recent checklist. that
recent
we needed
checklist,
some-
yeah, that was added. We originally weren't going to submit this geodatabase or portions of the geodatabase, and so now we are. And so just wanted to make sure that we've looked at it. You see, you know, you understand that it's you know, there's tons of data in there. As you know, as part of the checklist, there's as part of the database. There's also like the projects and everything, and we know we haven't identified a lot of the projects yet because we haven't had those conversations. So that's kind of where we're at right now with that process. But everything that other than a lot of the detailed projects, everything that they've asked for, we are able to provide and have to what we can say is a completed extent right now, knowing that we may receive some additional information from entities as we have these discussions and as we see these. And again, I expect this to be, we can start sharing this information probably in the next week or two and getting that out. So Neffy, Dave, expect that, and you can provide that to your staff, and they can provide the information back. We also will have the ability for everyone to look at it through the story map very shortly.
Ron, can we go over that checklist to make sure that those items are included so that we will have a motion to approve the memo and associated data, as well as the checklist that we have been provided? I think we need to identify that. So.
Okay, so task one, a list of existing political subdivisions. That's actually in the memo. We have all of the subdivisions in there. The polygon feature class with the entities, that's in there. That's identified. That was what's used to help us develop the list. Table C, existing flood infrastructure, natural features. We have that included. We also have that line. The 1.4 existing flood infrastructure polygon, that's the one Suzanne was asking about. Feature class should include general description, location, condition, functionality of natural flood mitigation features and constructed major features. So we have that data set. So there's polygons, lines, and points. The polygons are like your streams and storm sewer. Your polygons are going to be more your wetlands, your ponds, different things that we need to draw a polygon for. The lines are going to be your streams, your storm sewers, and then your points are you could actually the dams, low water crossings, things of that nature. So that's 1.4, 5, and 6, which we have. 1.7 ongoing flood mitigation projects. We have that table we got from a lot of the FIF, GLO, all of the different studies that projects that have gone on. I think there's even some TxDOT things in there.
And did you submit, Neffy? Do they have your list of ongoing projects?
Not yet. We're in the process of preparing all of our projects for this format to be submitted. So
Okay.
Not yet.
So that would
in the
be
process.
for this January or March?
Yes, for March.
So-
March. So we're working actually with one of these guys to format all of our projects, actually, we're right now going to be limited to just our regional projects that to fit in those categories. So we're going to be in the process of developing that to be included in this database.
Okay, and you're doing the same, Dave?
They haven't quoted me yet, but we've got a list of them.
Yeah, all of the projects that I need to get with Dave, but I don't know. Do you have any ongoing flood control projects right now? Most of it you have planned projects that we've discussed, and then you have projects that have already been built. Ongoing. Okay. Yeah, so we'll need to capture a couple of those ongoing projects.
Would also include the bond list for
But
projects.
that would be for FMPs. That would be FMPs, FMSs, and FMEs.
They have to have an identified dedicated source of funding to be considered an ongoing project or a proposed project.
Okay, well,
So if the bond hasn't passed, then they don't have an actual identified source of funding yet. So we have to be careful about which category we can include.
okay,
So
Yeah, I
then
forgot
they could
about
go
that.
into
That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, again, the bond should be passed by the time this document is finalized, so we can change
At
the
that
category
point.
on those.
So for March,
It may not be, but it's due like
The final version is due next year. Right.
okay.
yeah, so in January,
So we can
certainly.
change them.
So this database right now needs to be things that are already funded.
Yes,
Underway.
identified sources of funding,
Okay.
yes, dedicated and identified.
And I do have a couple of projects like that were funded through our budget process that are ongoing, and those we will certainly share with those. So that list will be a small list, but the other list will be larger.
And we've also received the Jeff's list too, so we need to incorporate those. The 1.9 is the low water crossings. So jumping into task 2, a written list of previous flood studies considered by the region. I think y'all saw that, the studies list. 2, a written list of available flood-related models. We went through that, where those the models that are available. Task 3, a list of specified flood mitigation and floodplain management goals. Those are our adopted goals that we have. 3B is the geodata. There's actually part of the geodatabase that we have to put the goals in. So same table, just goes into a different template. Task 4B, the streams feature class. And this is what will be used for the FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs, but we have the streams feature class, as you can see in there. The completed polygon watersheds, we have all the HUCs in there. So those are included. 4B3, the documented process, that is section 8, as we discussed. A written list of potential FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs. We have a small list that we've started. It's not extensive. It's just kind of like a placeholder as to get started to show that we have the data, and we're working through that. Then the feature class FMEs, FMPs, FMSs. Anything that we have in there, we will submit. These are very, very limited in what we have in the FMEs, FMPs, and FMSs right now. As you know, we're starting that. That's kind of what we're digging into now and identifying that. And then task 4C is written documentation that the planning group approves submittal of technical memorandum, and so all of this. So we'll have this meeting minutes. We'll attach it with that. So with that, Mr. Chair, that is the checklist that we will be submitting.
Ron, I needed
Steve.
to ask you on that potential deal. Is that the same thing? Does it need identified funding? Because it says potential.
On
There's, I think it's 4B, right there, 4B4. says potential FMEs, potential feasible. I mean, those are potential.
No, so ongoing projects is what Troy was talking about.
Yeah.
That's the projects that
So
are
the
currently
below-
going on. This is the FMEs and the FMPs that we're going to identify asking for funding.
Okay, so the below the line stuff could go
Yeah.
here.
Okay, so then Neffy's list of bond projects and below the line projects would go here in this list? Or is this something that we need to vet as a committee before it goes on the list? I mean, so I'm confused.
The bond projects are going to be kind of close, right? Those are going to be funded already, moving on. I would say 2027 bond projects could go on this list.
So what, let me
submittal.
try and clarify that, Suzanne. What Suzanne and Steve are referring to is that during the bond process, we identified the projects that were going to be funded by the bond. And those are the projects. And what we're saying is that those projects eventually, once the bond passes, would eventually fall on the list of potential or current projects.
Yes.
With a funding source identified as a city bond. During that process, during the committee process, we identified projects and we used the term below the line. And that means projects that were a priority to our community, but for whatever reason, were not included to be funded. It's the below the line projects were projects that when funding becomes available, this is our next priority. So in Stephen's committee, in the streets, as well as the drainage committee, projects were scored and ranked. They were scored, ranked, and prioritized below the line. That's why we refer to it as below line. So those projects that do not have a dedicated funding source at the time, or will, those are the ones that we're saying should be a potential FMP. Correct.
Yes, that is correct. And it doesn't have to have a funding source. It doesn't have to have a funding source. That's kind of what this is for, is asking for the funding.
Okay, but so just, I'm sorry to beat a dead horse here. I'm just trying to understand timing wise.
Right. So
Currently, the bond projects, although they're not identified funding, the ones above the line,
Mhm.
for this submittal, would they be on the list because this is due now or March, that they are still proposed, they are not they're not approved by the voters yet, they're not a funding. So assuming the bond, heaven forbid, does not pass, do you need that list now? Or does this list of projects that are on this submittal checkbox, does it really need to be there at this point in time? I'm just trying to get a sense of, what's vetting these projects that you're actually
So-
including in the database submittal next week or this week, whenever. Nothing's on the list.
No, the list, the projects that were on there were FIF projects, the Flood Infrastructure Fund projects that that the Water Development Board has different. There was a list that we got of FMEs, FMPs, FMSs that we got from as part of the data from the board. We can, again, all of those projects that are on there, all of them can be taken off. Once a project is on there, it does not have to stay. And we will go through the complete vetting process of where we are.
I think, Suzanne, what you're asking is, once we get all these projects from all the different entities, wherever they come from, what's the process to evaluate whether they're on the list or off the list?
Well, I'm asking two questions. You have a submittal that's due this week,
Mm-hmm. The bond projects are not on it.
but you have all these other projects we've not even seen.
Those are already
No.
funded.
I'm talking, this is a
There's
potential.
Okay.
There's a few potential FMEs, FMSs, and
We haven't seen them,
that you have not.
but we're including them on a submittal from this committee.
I can remove if you're more comfortable with that. We had them included. We had them included because those were from the Water Development Board, and those are projects that they provided us. Their Water Development Board project, their FIF projects.
So
and
yeah, there's above the line and below the line FIF projects too. So
So-
some of them got funded, some of them didn't, but they're still in the list of like approved projects. So those are in there now. But again, understand that 2 weeks ago, we got told we got to put all this in now. So we weren't anticipating any of this was going in for this submittal. We were thinking March which we would have time to go through the 4B process to look at what this
That's
committee
great.
wanted to include in the list. So
So-
we can take them all off.
The projects that or evaluations you've got in there are either already funded by Water Development Board, or they have been submitted by an entity approved but don't yet have dollars. So whether we pick them or not, ultimately, they're still going through and getting funding and happening.
Yes, exactly.
In theory,
There's a
either
chance they will
yes,
get
they
funded,
are, or they're in the next tranche of money that
potentially.
come. Yes. So those aren't really new things we'd be adding to the list and making available. Those are independent of us. They're just a, hey, FYI, these are out here, so they're in our database.
We hadn't gotten as far as to get every entity's list, vet them, go through the process. So when we have to submit the database, our idea is to show that in our good faith, to show that we're going to submit this with some data in it, was the information that we got from the board that showed a few projects in there. That way that shows that, hey, we're filling out the sheet. We know how to fill out the database. The projects can come off, can stay on. We can remove them from now. That way you can say, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying, Suzanne. We haven't seen them. I don't feel comfortable putting them on there. We can remove them. It's completely up to you.
I mean, can we go back to what Karis stated at the beginning, is that, I mean, we're still in draft form. So, I mean, you could keep them in there. I mean, it's not, I mean, 4B seems like it needs the most work for Friday. But once you get Neff's list for the bond and the below the line list, you can add those, Dave's list.
Yeah,
I mean-
and again, none of those are going to be added for Friday, Steve.
Yeah, I know.
They're going to be added for March.
Yeah, that's
And
what I'm
but
saying.
Yes,
but
that's the a bulk of our focus is going to be the task forward to start identifying these projects.
so, I mean, Friday's submittal, I mean, we all know it's like Kara said at the very beginning, it's draft. I mean, leaving the board's projects on there that are not funded, but are potential projects, I don't see a problem. I mean, and then once you get Neff's projects and Dave's projects and maybe Jeff's projects, I mean, you could just, add them.
But I mean, there's not a world where, hey, those are already funded by Water Development Board, and we take a look and say, nope, we're crossing that off the list. I mean, it's
Ones,
right.
not the funded, but potentially the unfunded ones. We're going to have an opportunity to vet those and decide whether or not if the Water Development Board is prioritizing where their next tranche of money goes. We may say for our region, instead of that project that was submitted independently of this process, we may want to prioritize another project in advance of that project. So I do think at some point we do want to look at what those projects that were submitted that weren't vetted by this, now that we have a process in place. I'm not saying we'll change any of the projects that were funded, of course not, but things that have not been funded, we may want to weigh in on projects in the region that we may think are higher priority for funding at some point.
I agree. I would certainly like to review those projects.
I say just leave them in for now would be my.
I'm not saying to take them out now. I'm to keep them. They're fine. I have no problem with them being in there. What I'm saying is at some point,
Oh, absolutely.
they'll have to be vetted just like, all the other projects too.
Absolutely. Everything's going through the vetting process. We're not trying to slip anything in or get any by you. Everything, the committee and the planning group has to approve all of the projects, evaluations, and strategies.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a dynamic process. I mean, the same way that that Neffy does flood control planning, in the same way that Bear County does flood control planning, or this group does flood control planning. Like I said, it's a dynamic process. I mean, projects come off the list, projects go on the list, development happens, things are happening upstream that need to be looked at. So I'm okay with the list as you have it right now and leaving the projects in there. And as long as we understand this is a dynamic process and we'll all have a chance to have input.
Ron, are we good with reviewing the checklist?
Yes.
All right.
We've gone through that.
Sounds good. Everybody's had a chance to look at the technical memo. We've had a chance to discuss, talk about this associated backup information, recognizing that it's not 100%. There are still details that need to be cleared up, but for the most part, the format, the information is there. appreciate the Water Development Board providing us a checklist to make sure that we have all this information, and having gone through that, reviewed the information on there and shown on the draft format. I know we still have some comments about some of the potential projects that will appear on the list. We also had some questions about some of the content, verifications on some of the numbers. That all of that kind of information we will be able to update and provide by March timeframe. With that caveat, let me ask for a motion of approval. And I want to be clear in the way we need to approve this. So I'm asking for a motion to approve the San Antonio Regional Flood Planning Group draft technical memo and associated backup and checklist.
This is Debbie Reed, and I make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion that we want to put on the record? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say aye or nay. Great. Hearing none. Congratulations, guys. We got our work done. All right.
Chair Neffy, it actually has to be a roll call vote. I might have not responded to Kindle in time.
That's all right, Anita.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Great. Okay.
All right, we'll start with Brian Yanta.
Aye.
Dave Wegman.
Aye.
Melissa Bryant.
Aye.
Doris Cooksey.
Aye.
Debbie Reed.
Yes.
Neffy Garza.
Aye.
Kara Tackett.
Aye.
Jeffrey Carroll.
Aye.
John Beasley.
Aye.
Suzanne Scott.
Aye.
Steve Gonzalez.
Aye.
David Mock.
Aye.
Sir, the motion has passed.
Thank you. Anita, I think that satisfies it, correct?
Correct.
This is Debbie Reed, and I'd just like to thank our consultant for I thought they had laid out the information and did a really great job on getting this together in such a short time. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
All right. Let's bring this, we're on the downhill slope here. So agenda item 8, regional liaison updates. I know last time we met, we had a couple of our liaisons that were out somewhere else. So I don't know if they have an update, but
Lots happening in Region 10. They had to approve the technical draft memorandum. Done.
welcome back, Kara. Thank you.
Same with our region as well. They approved the technical memo.
Perfect. Dave, Mock, I think you provided an update, but just in case.
Yeah, they got a meeting coming up on the 30th. So nothing's happened since this year.
Thank you, sir. Let's move on to agenda number 9. Once again, public comment period. Remind that we are limited to 3 minutes per person. Kendall, has anybody signed up to speak?
No, sir, there are no public comments.
Thank you on that. Next item is item number 10, date and potential agenda items for next meeting. Kendall?
Yes, sir, we have our February meeting scheduled for February 24th at 2 p.m. It will be a hybrid meeting, both here at the River Authority and online. We have several items on the agenda. We will have, if Dave Mock is still interested, he was asked to present on low water crossings in his area, but I will check in with him. We have a presentation from David Stoddard from
Skoudas.
Colorado. Sorry, Debbie?
Skoudas.
Skoudas, okay. And he will be giving a presentation as well. And today we asked Anita to present on flowcharts. So I will check in with her and get that presentation ready.
Yes, I did get that approved, so I'll prepare my slides and give them to you in time for meeting materials.
Thank you, Anita.
I had a request for the chairman. This is Debbie
Yes.
Reed, and because of the timing of David Skoudas, he asked if it would be possible to make his starting time as close to 2 o'clock as possible. Thank you.
We could make it at the beginning of the agenda. There was a question about public meeting.
There's a public meeting that's set for January the 11th, next week, Tuesday, from 6:30 to 8, and it's at Tradition Elementary School in St. Hedwig. And there's an ad that'll be running tomorrow in the Wilson County News, and then we've sent out flyers, and the flyers have a QR code that people can go onto the QR code and go to the survey, so that if they don't come to the meeting, they can still go ahead and give some feedback, give you all some input. It's called Tradition Elementary School, and I can send you I can send you all a copy of the flyer so you can see the address and everything.
Yes, please send that out because I know
Yeah.
there has been interest in some of us attending.
And we welcome some of you, but we cannot have all of you. Quorum, yeah, we don't want to violate a quorum.
Yes,
I
exactly.
volunteer to not attend to solve that problem, okay?
I will not be able to be there because I'm giving a presentation at that time. So this is Debbie Reed.
I'm sorry, Debbie, could you repeat that again? We were discussing.
I will not be able to attend as I'm giving a presentation at the exact same time.
Hi,
Got it.
this is Laura with Jimenez and Associates. Just a reminder that the flyer with the QR code is also on the website.
Ron, this is Dave Malk. Remember, we got a meeting on the 20th with the Regional Emergency Management Group in Bandera. They want you to come talk to them.
Ron is nodding.
That's and just so Mr. Chair that you know and the rest of the planning group knows, there is a meeting of the Emergency Managers Association, which is everyone basically south of Bandera from what I've been told, and they want to hear about the process, the flood planning process and how it's going and where we're at in our region. So we're going to have we're going to have the opportunity to get in front of a lot of people. So really excited about that, to talk about our region and Region 13 as well. On the 20th.
Yeah,
And-
Ron, I'll send you an email out. They want a bio from you and some other stuff, so I'll send the contact information over.
Okay, and I'll send it out to Kendall, and she can provide it in case there's a couple from the group that would like to attend.
That would work. Thank you. Kendall, anything else on next meeting? Our next meeting scheduled for February 24th at 2 o'clock.
In our February meeting, we will also be holding officer elections, and I will be sending out information on that. It's going to be an annual process. I will remind the current officers that they can continue their roles and there are no term limits, but I will be sending out information to all of you very soon regarding that general process.
Thanks, Kendall. Do we have a technical or community outreach, I can remember the name, committee meetings between now and February? Don't we have needs for them?
I was just going to ask the chair that if we could set the January meeting, if we can set a meeting in January for both the outreach and technical committees, and then in those committees we can set the February.
Let's do that, but let me hold that for a minute because I don't know if you guys understood what Kendall just mentioned. that we will have officer election again. So once again, those that hold officer positions in this committee, it's going to be a yearly thing that every year we have to be nominated and this group has to agree. So if somebody wants to take my job, here's your chance.
You can
But we
have
also
it.
have some the other positions that can be nominated. So I just keep that in mind because I think it's an important note. Having said that, let's talk about those two committees, the technical committee as well as the outreach committee. The outreach committee, have they set a January meeting? No. Okay.
There hasn't been one set, but I think we can set one as soon as possible. I think we're ready to start talking about, we have our public meeting coming up in St. Hedwig, but we need to talk about our downstream meetings.
Can you remind me who for us chairs the outreach committee, Suzanne? Okay.
I can absolutely send out a doodle poll if you'd like. I know in the last couple of months, we've kind of come up with a consensus during the meeting. If there are available dates that work well for you, Suzanne, in the next couple of weeks, and we can run those by other members of the outreach committee that are on the call, seeing how we have almost everyone here, it would be a good time.
Do you need it at a particular time? I mean, this needs to be before the next meeting, right? So I mean, like,
Ideally.
Yeah, we'd like to have one in January, Suzanne. That way we'd leave an opportunity to have one in February.
so is the 27th too late in the month of January?
Well, kind of the idea, Suzanne, is we need to set the downstream meetings. If we want to have the outreach committee be in that discussion on when we set those meetings. If
So
not, then
The 14th then? That Friday the 14th? I don't know. Is that soon enough? I'm just trying to get a sense of, that's next week.
Just so you know our timeline, Suzanne, we have to have, just so everyone knows our timeline, as part, we want to have public comment, as much public comment for that March 7th submittal. And so we'll need time to process a lot of that. There's a lot of data to process. So we'd like to close that process sometime in, I mean, we can leave it open, right? We can continue to collect information because it is dynamic, but we'd like to have as much of the public meetings done prior to the March 7th submittal, giving us a couple weeks. So I'd like to talk in the next week or so, maybe to start talking about when we can set the next downstream public meetings. And I know we need, Linda, how many weeks do we need, in order to get a good meeting? What do we need, 2 or 3 weeks notice? So, I mean, just starting right now, we'd be in the first part of February before we could have a meeting. So,
Well, I'm just offering that maybe January the 14th is a good day for me for a committee meeting, if that works. I don't know. I mean, I've got time that day.
okay, that'll work. And in the meantime, I'll work with Linda to start setting up some, looking into locations and logistics. And that way we can bring it to the committee to talk about there.
So we just need to figure out.
And anybody else on the January 14th for the outreach committee? Any other members in the outreach committee with the 14th? The afternoon, you talking about, Suzanne, or what time works best for you?
It either can be late afternoon or in the morning. Either time. I have kind of a gap held from about 1 to 3 on my calendar, but I can miss it if I have to. But I'm trying to.
How does 10 o'clock on Friday, January 14th sound for the next outreach committee meeting?
You're on the outreach.
Are there any objections to that time?
That time work for you? Okay. Jeff, you're on the technical. How about you? Everybody's okay. Debbie, you're on the outreach committee, correct? She's on the tech.
I'm on the outreach committee, and that works for me.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we got 3 then. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, the next one, technical.
I'm looking at the 13th at 1:30.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Okay.
All right, so the next technical committee, January 13th at 1:30?
Yes. I am. No, I'm looking at his calendar.
Yeah, Melissa's in for him. And then the outreach committee on the 14th at 10 in the morning. Okay. You good with that? So let me just ask, make sure that during your committees, you set the next meeting up also, so we don't have to follow this process again here. Set the meetings up during the next time. Okay. So
And
any other
hopefully
questions
a
about
recurring
scheduling or meetings that are coming up? No? Okay. Hearing none, let's move on to agenda number, the last agenda item, number 11. Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining in. All those on the call. See you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.